It was then that Hannah surprised him. With a determined set to her jaw, she turned to Malcolm. "There's a cellar," she said quickly, "hidden under the rug. Take the baby and hide there. I'll deal with our unwelcome visitors." Gratitude washed over Malcolm. "Thank you," he said fervently. "But why are you helping us?" Hannah's eyes twinkled with a hint of mischief. "Let's just say I know a thing or two about keeping secrets from those who would abuse power. Now hurry." As Malcolm and Lyra descended into the hidden cellar, he could hear Hannah opening the door, her voice carrying a convincing tone of sleepy confusion. "Can I help you, gentlemen? Do you know what time it is?" The cellar was small and dark, lit only by a faint sliver of light from above. Malcolm held Lyra close, trying to keep her quiet. As they listened to the muffled conversation overhead, his heart pounded so loudly he was sure it would give them away. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Malcolm could make out bits and pieces of the exchange. Gruff male voices asking questions, Hannah's steady denials. He silently willed the old woman to stay strong, to not give them away. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, he heard the sound of retreating footsteps and a door closing. A few moments later, Hannah's face appeared at the cellar entrance. "They're gone," she said softly. "You can come up now." As they emerged from their hiding place, Malcolm felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. The events of the night, the harrowing journey down the river, the near-droning, the tension of hiding all caught up with him at once. He swayed on his feet, and Hannah quickly guided him to a chair. "You've been through quite an ordeal, haven't you?" she said, her voice full of motherly concern. "Both of you need rest. You'll stay here tonight, and we'll figure out what to do in the morning." Malcolm wanted to protest, to insist that they needed to keep moving. But his eyelids were growing heavy, and even Lyra had drifted off to sleep in his arms. He nodded gratefully, allowing Hannah to show him to a small guest room. As he settled Lyra into a makeshift crib, really just a drawer lined with soft blankets, Malcolm felt a surge of protectiveness wash over him. He may only be 11, but in this moment, he felt the weight of responsibility on his young shoulders. Whatever came next, he would face it. For Lyra, the storm continued to rage outside, but within the cottage, all was peaceful. Malcolm drifted off to sleep, Asta curled up beside him, to the gentle sound of Lyra's steady breathing. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having blown itself out during the night. Malcolm awoke to the smell of cooking and the soft cooing of Lyra. For a moment, he was disoriented, the events of the previous night feeling like a distant dream. But as he sat up and saw Lyra in her makeshift crib, reality came rushing back. They were still in danger, still on the run. And yet, in the warm light of day, with the scent of breakfast in the air, it was hard to feel the same sense of urgency that had driven them through the night. Hannah greeted them with a hearty meal and a determined glint in her eye. "I've been thinking," she said, as Malcolm tucked into a plate of eggs and toast, "about your situation. You can't keep running forever, especially not with a baby in tow." Malcolm nodded, his mouth full of food. He had been thinking the same thing, but hadn't been able to see a way out of their predicament. "I have some connections," Hannah continued, a hint of mystery in her voice. People who might be able to help keep you and little Lyra safe. But it would mean trusting me completely. Can you do that, Malcolm? Malcolm looked at Hannah, really looked at her. Behind the grandmotherly exterior, he saw strength and wisdom. This was a woman who had seen much in her life, who knew how to keep secrets. Slowly, he nodded. Good, Hannah said, her face breaking into a smile. Then finish your breakfast. We have a busy day ahead of us. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Hannah made a series of cryptic phone calls, speaking in what seemed to be code. Malcolm busied himself with caring for Lyra, marveling at how quickly he had adapted to the role of protector. As the sun began to set, Hannah announced that it was time to leave. Our ride will be here soon, she said, helping Malcolm gather their few belongings. Remember, no matter what happens, stay calm and trust me. They waited in the gathering dusk, the only sound the gentle lapping of the now calm river against its banks. And then Malcolm heard it, the distinctive whump-whump of helicopter blades. A sleek, black helicopter appeared over the treetops, descending to land in the field behind Hannah's cottage. As the door slid open, Malcolm saw a familiar face, one he had only ever seen in newspapers and on television. Lord Asriel, he breathed, his eyes wide with shock. The imposing man stepped out of the helicopter, his snow leopard Damon padding silently beside him. His eyes locked onto Lyra, a complex mix of emotions playing across his face. You've done well, Malcolm, Lord Asriel said, his voice gruff but not unkind. But it's time to let us take it from here. Lyra will be safe with me. Malcolm felt a surge of protectiveness. After everything they'd been through, the thought of handing Lyra over to anyone, even her own father, felt wrong. But Hannah's hand on his shoulder steadied him. It's all right, she said softly. This is what we planned for. Lord Asriel can protect her in ways we can't. With a heavy heart, Malcolm stepped forward. He looked down at Lyra, meeting her curious gaze one last time. Goodbye, Lyra, he whispered. Stay safe. Stay brave. As he handed the baby to Lord Asriel, Malcolm felt as though a chapter of his life was closing. But even as the helicopter lifted off, carrying Lyra to whatever fate awaited her, he knew that their paths would cross again someday. Hannah put an arm around his shoulders as they watched the helicopter disappear into the darkening sky. You've done a brave thing, Malcolm, she said. And I have a feeling your adventure is far from over. Malcolm nodded, Asta nuzzling against his cheek in comfort. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that his life had been irrevocably changed by his time with Lyra. Whatever came next, he would face it, with the courage and determination he had discovered within himself on that stormy night on the river. As they turned back towards the cottage, the first stars of evening began to twinkle overhead. Somewhere out there, Lyra was beginning the next stage of her journey. And Malcolm, though his part in her story seemed to be over for now, couldn't shake the feeling that their paths were destined to cross again.